Well, who says that you can't mix politics and Pilsners? So does it show that you were recording on your end?
I am. Yep.
Is this thing on?
We're live, baby.
Democrats destroy everything they touch.
We need to defend the police, not defund them.
MAGA, it's more than a man. It's a movement. In the 2020 election, free and fair, yes or no?
Absolutely not.
COVID has created a tyrannical government.
This is the only country in the world where those who hate it never leave.
Whether you like Pilsners, bourbons, or anything in between,
grab your favorite beverage and come have a drink with us.
Hey everybody, it's Benjamin Culper, host of Pilsners and Politics Podcast. If you've ever listened to our show, you know how much we love our beers and our bourbons. But did you know we absolutely love wine as well? We love wine so much that we've teamed up with 13 Stripes Winery. Head on over to 13stripeswinery.com. Again, that's 13, the number 13, stripeswinery.com. Use code word BEN, B-E-N, to get 10% off your next order. At checkout, use code word B-E-N to get 10% off your next order at 13stripeswinery.com. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Pilsners and Politics. Today we have Raymond Johnson joining us. Ray, how are you?
I'm great, Benji. How about you?
I'm doing really well. So, Ray, you're located down here in the swamp with me, and you audit for a regional firm. But I think more importantly, you are a veteran. Tell our listeners about you and how you bring credibility and credence to this show.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you mentioned, I'm a veteran. I was in the Marine Corps for 8 years. I didn't join right out of high school. I was actually I graduated in the early 2000s, and so September 11th hadn't happened yet. I'll be honest, I remember skipping a calculus class that morning when 9/11 happened, and I jumped on my AOL and I thought, oh, this looks like a really sort of interesting action movie or something that maybe I'll check this out, right? So I checked it out, and it turned out it wasn't a movie at all. It was it was 9/11. So I managed to turn on the TV to witness the second plane, hit, right? So you hear a lot of people talk about, oh, where were you on when Kennedy was assassinated, that sort of thing. I think for our generation, 9/11 was really that big sort of turning point. And so that was the thing that got me motivated to say, I need a new direction in my life. I can't wait here while I'm still in school. I bounced and said, I want to get on board. And I want to start, making the Taliban pay for these American lives that were lost, right? So I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I was an infantry guy, and after I got out, decided to go back to school. Got an accounting degree, and I've been doing that ever since. You mentioned that I audit, so that's sort of like the tangent or the direction that I went off with that background. But yeah, so that's sort of the gist. What do I bring to this? I think that I have a pretty strong background in, business, finance, economics, those sorts of things. So, I think that's often that's what I can add to the conversation.
Nice. Yeah. And, this isn't, for the listeners out there, this isn't your first time on the show. This is actually your second time. You joined us live at a local restaurant here in Arlington, Virginia to do a show. And we discussed an array of topics. It was an awesome conversation. The people that were out there at the restaurant watching really enjoyed it. It was a really cool show. But today what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the GOP, the Grand Old Party, and the direction that it's headed, and potentially the direction that it probably should be going. So let's just kick it off right away. What do you think the status of the GOP is? If you look at the news, I just quickly Googled, and Yahoo News seems to think that the GOP is in disarray. Do you happen to agree with that sentiment? So,
yeah, in a nutshell, I do. Okay. I think a lot of this topic started off when I came across an article that appeared on this website called The Red State. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but there are a lot of, I think I've shared some information from that website previously, especially how it relates to local, swamp politics. One idea that I think has popped up occasionally is, can an America First movement be successful in Northern Virginia? And I'm not so sure, right? I mean, there's a lot of active folks, a lot of intelligent people in this area. So a lot of people are active in politics. So, what I see, my own take on this is that, we talk about the grand old party, right? There's this new term known as the GOP-e, and I don't know how familiar you are with that term, but, my takeaway from that is that, that's big G, big O, big P, little e, meaning, establishment. And, it goes by other names. You may have heard of these country club Republicans, right? And so I think what you're seeing with the America First, the MAGA crowd and this GOP-e is that we kind of become strange bedfellows. So we're buddies because, we like to see us win, right? We all want to own the Dems, right? Right. We all see sort of the nasty direction that our country's headed in. But, I think the problem is, we're the same group, but we don't always necessarily agree on the best approach to winning, to victory. And I think that's one of the things that creates a weakness within the GOP itself, right? Or the sort of internal struggle that we've got. So, like I said, in a nutshell, yeah, look, I do think that we are sort of in disarray. I don't think it necessarily has to be that way. I think we are the adults in the room on both sides, but look, people care when the people care about this thing, when people care about things, right? It's easy to get emotional, and I'm guilty of it myself, and I want to, I want what's best for this country. And I think it's good for Republicans. I mean, really, I want to say all Americans, but I mean, let's be realistic here. And I've said this for several years now, right? I actually consider myself to be more liberal, like in a classical liberal sense, right? Right. Libertarian, freedom loving. But, I've always voted Republican because they're the only sane ones. I don't buy into all of this progressivism. Anyway, so I don't want to talk ad nauseum, but to answer your question, yeah, look, I do think we're in disarray, but I think there's a plan for us to move forward.
All right. So talking about just taking it to a local level, right? So we take Northern Virginia, right? So Northern Virginia, it's just like this little petri dish of Republicans. And I happen to agree with you. I think the Republicans here in Northern Virginia are not your typical Republican, right? I think that they far too often socially liberal. Does that make sense? The Republicans within this county, right? Arlington County. I think honestly, in most other states that they would be left of center as opposed Absolutely. To right of center or even far right.
Yeah, no, look, you're absolutely right. I think you bring up some good points. I'll just speak to what I've seen when I go to party events, right? You mentioned Arlington. I've been to a few of those events. That tends to be a younger crowd, which honestly I'm happy to see. But I spend a lot of time also going to the Fairfax County group. So, really we're talking the difference between 8th District and 10th. And then if you go a little further out west, then you start to see the 11th District, right? So you definitely see the sort of demographic change. And what I'll say, at least what I've seen within, the 10th District, is that there are a lot of older folks there, right? And it's sort of a joke. Like I feel comfortable being around all ages of people, right? And I love to hear different perspectives, and I love older Americans because they have seen and they have experienced in America that you and I just will never see because, it was just a different time, different place, and this isn't this sort of like wistful thinking about how things used to be. I mean. I believe them when they say that this is how things were, or even this is how Northern Virginia was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. It's hard to kind of not look back and think, can that be our future? Can we get back to some sort of like semblance of normalcy, right?
Can we?
Well, so here's the issue that I have with the older folks, right? So the point, I guess this is the point that I was trying to make. To me, the issue is that I think they tend to be unaware, right? They want to hold on to, and I think I've said this before too, right? The problem with, I think, sometimes being conservative is that you almost necessarily have to play defense. And I think anybody that's ever played sports or has any familiarity with, the military, right? Military operations, law enforcement, that sort of thing, right? Is that it's much easier to be on offense, right? And there's this saying you might be familiar with, but and I'm going to sort of paraphrase, but it's the sort of thing where, when you're the bad guy, you have to be right 100% of the time, right? When you're the good guys, right? And when I take good guys to be like the offense, right? When you're on the offense, you only have to be right, one time, right? And just have that lucky break and, you score that touchdown or whatever, right? I've got a couple different metaphors that I'm juggling here. So I think that's it, from the get-go. I think being a conservative, you're necessarily in a sort of defensive position. And it's
right.
With this whole progressivism, it's like, are we still progressive? Yeah, we're just progressive on like super slow motion.
Right.
You know what I mean? Which, I hate to sort of acknowledge that. And I'm sure there are people that are listening that will wholeheartedly disagree. And let me say, people that will disagree, I would love to chat with them and I would love to buy them a beer because I want to hear what their plan is, right? I want to be wrong on this is what I'm saying. Okay.
Right.
But going back to like the older folks, I think the issue is that a lot of these folks, especially these GOP-e, right, country club Republicans, they don't recognize it, right? They're still happy and content, and they're in the sunsets of their careers and their lives, and they just want to kind of pump the brakes and just kind of ride into obscurity and just keep things the way they were, in the Reagan years, and with Nixon and and these maybe even some of them going back to Eisenhower, right? But the problem is, I think that they don't have this awareness that we're in the midst of a culture war. Right.
100%.
And that, it takes more than just trying to maintain the status quo to be successful, and I think this is one of the things that made Donald Trump so successful is that he recognized that. And even though I personally never really considered him a true conservative. Okay. But one of the things that I liked about him, appreciated about him, the same thing with Ron DeSantis, although I do think Ron DeSantis is more of a bona fide conservative, is the fact that, they're willing to go into the fire. Right. And to paraphrase what Ron DeSantis said yesterday about, the hearing, the January 6th hearing. And people like that, especially Republicans, they like to see that. And the MAGA crowd, the America First crowd, you see a lot of these, these walk away groups. They're leaving the Democrat Party because they're starting to kind of see, the bullshit on the left. But they want somebody who's going to be in the ring and who's going to be a fighter. Right. And that, to me, that's the problem. When you say that they would be center left in other states, well, that's because, like I said, they're trying to maintain the status quo. They don't want to stir the pot, but we're way past, playing nice. And I see that at a lot of these meetings that I go to. There are these groups that are definitely driving America first. But, even within our own party, I think a lot of folks see them as alt-right or extreme right, far right. And I think that's ridiculous. I think last time we've talked about this Overton window before, right? And this ties back into my idea that, even with the Republicans, we're progressive just on slow motion, right? The problem is, though, that things have shifted so far to the left, what we consider to be quote unquote normal has shifted so far to the left that what used to be normal is now seen as extreme. And how does that happen? How does that? I mean, the Overton window explains how it happens, right? But it's just, how do you fight against that, right?
Right. And it happens suddenly too, right? It's like we just woke up one day and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, what happened to the America that was yesterday?
Yeah. Well, can I just say something? So I'm going to actually disagree with you on that because I think it happens so slowly that you don't see it happening.
That's the point.
But then you wake up to it one day when, look, we got a lot of distractions in our lives. We have families, jobs, primetime television. I mean, I'm kidding. I don't really watch a lot of TV, but everybody's got their own things, right? And I think that when you do sort of wake up from that stupor or that, when you have time, right? Because especially early in your career, people tend to be really busy because they're trying to make it, climb the corporate ladder, or they're trying to, get promotions or be successful, make sure that they save up money for a house and a family, right? So they've got so many things that they're juggling that it's easy to not worry about what's going on, right?
Right.
And then you wake up one day, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, and you say, whoa, wait a minute. When did all of these things change?
Right.
So, yeah, I will say, I think from our perspective, it seems like it happened suddenly, but it's what to me, what's actually happening suddenly is the waking up is sudden and it's terrifying.
Right. So you talk a little bit about the GOP-e and we'll just refer to not the establishment, but I want to kind of talk about the old guard, right? The the members of the conservative or of the Republican Party, out in the 11th district, 10th district, whatever, if you want to get local, but if you want to go on the national level, just the older Republicans, and how, they're in the golden years of their life, and, they're kind of happy with the status quo. And I think that plays a part into how we got to where we're at today as a society, right? So like you said, we've been happy with how things have been going, right? And over time, I feel like our elected representatives in both state legislatures and down here in DC in Congress, they've been willing to concede a little bit each term, right? But then you compound how much that they've conceded to the Democrats, to the radical left, and over the course of 50, 60 years, and it's actually been a lot. And how often do the Democrats or the radical left ever concede to the Republicans? Prime example, Congress is currently holding funding for the SCOTUS justices hostage until they reach a deal on gun control right now. And anybody who doesn't see that clearly lives under a rock, right? Because the Senate has already passed their bill, and they're just waiting on Nancy Pelosi to pass hers. But she's not gonna bring it to a vote until she gets what she wants on gun control. And what are Republicans going to do? They're going to concede, and they're going to give up our Second Amendment fundamental right, all because they want to get funding to the justices.
Sure.
And I think that the justices should be funded, but I don't think that we should be holding 2A hostage.
Right. No, absolutely. Look, and I'm glad that you brought up the Second Amendment. You brought up gun control. I mean, that's a perfect example of, things that have been chipped away over the past 100 years, 150 years. Right. And, I mean, look, it's pretty basic. Right. I think it's silly that people today will say, when they read the Second Amendment and it says shall not be infringed, that they're still scratching their heads and say, I wonder what the founders could have meant by this. I mean, could they be any clearer?
Right.
And so, look, I don't. I hate to sound like a gun nut. And again, this is the Overton window, right? The fact that I'm apologizing for this already, right? But I only say that because I know that people that are listening can relate to this, because they have, I think a lot of us have these feelings, but we also recognize, and that's why we have to whisper. Sometimes we hesitate to put out our yard signs because, we don't want the screeching lunatics to be like, oh, you're a Proud Boy, you're alt-right or whatever, Right. But with same thing with guns. Look, man, if you can afford the gun, you can afford the firearm, which is the NRA's preferred term, by the way. That's always a funny thing for me being a military person, because, being a veteran, because you learn, though, this is your weapon, this is that. Yeah. And then they'll say, you need to change your language. It's a firearm, and this is, get used to referring to it as a firearm, because, you want to, basically CYA, right? Cover your ass in case anything ever happens. It's the same thing with like assault weapons or assault rifles, right? A lot of times you'll hear people say, look, we know that this semi-automatic rifle is just like any other hunting rifle, right? But if you get it with a wooden stock instead of the big, scary, tactical plastic, polymer, right? Suddenly it's, it's not going to look as scary to like the average juror. And, you have a better chance of protecting yourself if you ever, find yourself being prosecuted by some, lefty DA, in a self-defense case. Right. So anyway, one of the things that I just want to point out. So what you said about the Second Amendment, absolutely, this is something that has been chipped away over time. To me, it's simple, shall not be infringed. And I think there are a lot of things that need to get rolled back to get us back to where we're at. And I think you're seeing that right now. You talked about withholding funding, right, until they can pass. Like even Pelosi said herself, she'd be happy with some sort of compromise. But that's the problem. You can't compromise on this, right? These are our rights. And I try to tell folks this all the time. Look, I supported the NRA for a long time. I have a harder time giving them money now. I'd rather give money to like Virginia Citizens Defense League or these other organizations that really seem to be more focused on maintaining our rights, our liberties, right? But I tell folks this all the time. NRA is really focused on sporting and hunting and this sort of thing. That's the decision that they made because they thought it was easier to defend that. And look, I think that's great. There's a lot of great training through the NRA. But the fact of the matter is that the Second Amendment was put into the Bill of Rights, right, to limit the power of the government, right? And any
Right.
chipping away is the government slowly, stepping on our rights so they can take over our rights. And I know this sounds crazy and far-fetched to some people, to the folks on the lefties, but I'm telling you, I don't trust the government. I don't.
And nobody should. The size of our government today was never intended to be this large. And I think our founders would be quite upset with how large we've allowed it to be. That being said, how can we as the GOP, right, as the Republican Party, I kind of want to bring this, back in a little bit. How can we move forward, especially since we're talking about the 2A issue? How can we move forward on the 2A issue and also evolve as a party, right? Because I think that's the thing. How do we as a GOP take advantage of how terrible this administration's doing and grab those people who are just left of center, who are tired of the Democrat Party, who are tired of the radical left running the Democrat Party? How do we get those people to our side?
Sure. No, absolutely. Look, and I'm going to refine your question slightly too. Instead of saying, how do we as a GOP, because actually I prefer to think of it as, how do we as patriots, how do we as concerned Americans, concerned citizens, right? How do we fix these things? Because, like you started off, is the GOP in shambles? I think that we have some internal issues that need to be resolved, right? And I think that once we can figure that out, and once we can utilize the party's resources and create this sort of unified GOP, just like you see on the left, right? I'm happy when the left splinters up, but when they're unified, and that's because they get a lot of idiots that will just do what they're told. Let's be honest here; they got a lot of dummies on the GOP on the Democrat side, right? But look, here's my plan, and I didn't come up with this. I mentioned that Red State article earlier, and I thought it was a pretty good article. It was written, believe it or not, on January 6th, 2021. So, this was obviously before, the events of that day happened, later on in the afternoon. But 3 easy steps, right? First one that we all need to do at a grassroots level is articulate actual principles, right? And I'll go into some detail about that. The second thing we need to do is recruit and elect better people, period, 100%. To run, right? And the third thing, in order to make that second thing happen is you need to get involved, right? So what I want to do is just kind of briefly go into each of these main 3 things to kind of explain what I mean, or at least what I took away from that article. And these are the things that I agree with, right? So first off, when they talk about articulating actual principles, one of the meetings that I went to, they opened up with a recitation of the Virginia Republican Creed, and I thought it sounded fantastic. So I went to the Virginia GOP website and I jotted those down. So there are 6 elements. First, Virginia Republican Creed. We believe that the free enterprise system is the most productive supplier of human needs and economic justice. 2, that all individuals are entitled to equal rights, justice, and opportunities and should assume their responsibilities as citizens in a free society. 3rd, that fiscal responsibility and budgetary restraints must be exercised at all levels of government. 4, that the federal government must preserve individual liberty by observing constitutional limitations. 5, that peace is best preserved through a strong national defense. And 6th, that faith in God, as recognized by our founding fathers, is essential to the moral fiber of the nation, right? And so, we could do an entire show just kind of probably splitting out these, parsing out these 6 items. But I think it's important for individuals to be familiar with this creed, and ask themselves, even beyond the creed, who are you? Who are we? Like, what do you stand for? What do we stand for? Right. And I think a lot of people just sort of are on autopilot and don't consider these things. And, I remember being in the military, being in the Marine Corps, right? When I was younger, I was a Boy Scout, and I became an Eagle Scout. And all of these organizations, right, as Christians, right, you have the Apostles' Creed, right? You state the things that you believe in. So I think for strong organizations, it's always important to know who you are, know what you stand for, and you use these creeds as sort of a guiding light, guiding principles, right? And I think these 6 bullets here, there's a lot of weight in these bullets. And I think that even if you use this as a litmus test or as a benchmark, you'd realize that there probably are some Republicans running for office that probably are these, we use the term rhino a lot, right?
Right.
And, sometimes people will ask, well, what makes them a rhino? Is it just because you don't like them or because they disagree with you? And I think sometimes we don't know what the answer is, right? I think sometimes our benchmark is, well, they disagree with Donald Trump, so therefore that person's a rhino, right? But, I don't know that that's sufficient. So I think it's good for us to kind of go back to our roots, figure out what's important to us. What are we, what's important to us, especially post Donald Trump, right? And don't get me wrong. I think Donald Trump was fantastic. I wasn't really a big believer at the beginning, but he sold me. Yeah. I thought he was fantastic. He was a fighter. But we need to kind of realign our compass. And I think that's the best way for the party to kind of reunify, remember the things that are important to us. All right. The second bullet that I talked about was recruiting and electing better people. All right. Just keep in mind, look, the statistic I saw was that the 2020 election had the highest turnout in over 120 years. Right. Now, of course, some people are going to say, well, some of those were robots, machines, right?
Right.
Those aren't real votes. Okay. But let's assume that, election integrity, that there wasn't widespread election fraud. Let's take that as a given, okay, for the sake of argument here. That's 66.7% of the population. So a third of Americans still aren't going out and voting, right?
Right.
So the question is, who are those Americans? Why aren't they voting? And often what I find, especially in Northern Virginia, is that there are a lot of Republicans that don't vote because they think it's futile.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They're like, I don't see any Republican signs out there. I've had contractors come to my place and they see my sign because I haven't put it in my yard yet, right? Because it's too soon, right? I get it ready and I put it on day one. And they said, oh, I didn't realize there were any Republicans in Northern Virginia. I was like, well, we're here, but we all hide out. And I know we're here because I see them, because you and I, we're involved. We meet other people that are involved. But to me, the task is finding those other people that are hiding out. It's time for us to bring them out of the closet, right? I mean, it's Pride Month. Right? They can be pride. They can have pride in being conservatives in Northern Virginia,
and they should have pride in being Republicans in Northern Virginia.
Right? No,
right?
Absolutely.
We shouldn't be hiding.
Right. And look, a lot of times people will say, "Well, I want to go back to Georgia or Florida or Texas or some other place, Oklahoma, where it's safe to be a conservative." And I get that. I mean, but that's easy mode. I think that it takes a lot of guts to be where the battlefield is. I mean, this is the front lines. You got a lot of people moving into Virginia, a lot of people moving out of Virginia. But you look at where these people are coming from that are moving into Virginia, and this is a battleground state. I mean, people have kind of tossed their hands up and said, well, it's a blue state. Glenn Young can kind of change that a little bit, but I think that I got my own thoughts on that. I hate to say this, but part of me feels like that was like we barely won that. You know what I mean? It took a lot of his own money. It took McAuliffe, making his, huge gaffe about, the parents not being involved in education, right?
Right.
And still, I think we won by like 1.5% of the vote,
Right.
So there's a lot to fight here for. And so one of the things we need to do is get people out to get, to vote and find the, sort of that next generation of young Republicans that recognize that we're in a culture war and, have the endurance, the strength, the willingness to fight, right? To be sort of the vanguard of this new Republican Party. And then this last bullet, when I talk about getting involved, a couple steps, I try to draft a few ideas because I think there's sometimes people out there that are listening that really don't, they say, well, I want to do this. These are great ideas, but I really don't know what to do. Just like little old me, like what difference can I make, right?
Right.
And look, it's really critical. In the creed, they talk about, exercising budget restraint and physical responsibility at all levels of government. Right. And look, here's another sort of cliche, right, is that all government is, fundamentally local. Right. And so, people come out in presidential election years, they may come out, in the off years, but there's an election day every year. OK.
Right.
And you got to remember that your vote is worth more. The smaller the election, the more that your vote is worth. So you need to get involved. Contact your local Republican committee. Get on Google, your favorite search engine, and figure out who they are, where they meet, and go to a meeting. I mean, they tend to be relatively friendly people. At least that's been my experience, right? And they're always understaffed, and they always need volunteers, right? So that's my second point here. So, see where they need help. See what you can do to volunteer. Okay. Sometimes this is a once a month or every other month thing, right? Don't wait until November to say, okay, hey, election's coming up this week. what do you need me to do? Look,
Right.
the time to start is, the next day after the last election, right? And this is an ongoing thing. To me, this is part of your civic duty. It's hard to be a free person. It's hard to be a free citizen, right? And, at a minimum, you need to go out and you need to be voting and you need to be performing your civic duties. Like I said, a third of Americans can't even be bothered to do that in a presidential election year, right? You got to ask yourself, is that me, right? Are we those people? So see where they need help, volunteer. You can serve as a poll watcher or an election official. Often you get paid a small stipend for that, right? Volunteer for local campaign. If you find somebody that you really like, go knock doors, right? Look, at a bare minimum, put your sign out, right? Come out of the closet, right? Put your sign out at a bare minimum, right? But go and interact, find those people. It takes some work, but you get some vitamin D, put you in a better mood, you get a little bit of exercise, some fresh air, and realize that, there aren't as many insane leftists in your neighborhood as you think that there are, right?
Right.
And lastly, and, this is a big lift, but if you don't see those great people that you want, run for office. Right. Right. This is another cliche. I'm going to throw out another cliche. I love cliches, right? But what is be the change that you want to see, right?
Right.
Right. But anyway, so yeah, look, I think fundamentally, like I said, break it down into those three things: articulate your principles, recruit and elect better people, get involved, and do that at a local level. Fix the school boards, right? So that way, and this is a long-term thing, but the lefties have been doing this for a while. Right? They indoctrinate the kids in the schools. Okay. So, this may be a 10, 20-year project, but 20 years from now, 18 years from now, hopefully your local schools are pumping out, quality Americans, patriots, conservatives, kids that are fit enough to, enlist, to protect us while we're in the nursing homes. Right. Versus, what, the alternative is, they're going to be churning out these like Antifa, mental health, crazies and stuff, right? That decide that, the best way to deal with life's problems is to, make the 6 o'clock news by, performing atrocities. Right.
Right.
So anyway, I think really that's the gist of it. That's the gist of what's our future. And I wish it was easy. I wish it was easy. I wish it was something that I could say, hey, if you do these simple things, I mean, I think they're pretty simple things. It's easy to talk about, but it takes work. It takes consistency. You got to dig your heels in and, have the discipline and shape your culture. I mean, we are in the midst of a culture war, period. Information war.
100%. 100%. You said when should we start preparing for the next election? And you had said that the day after the election is when you start for the next one. And I think you're absolutely right. And then you also mentioned how regaining the America that we once had and taking America in the direction that we see that it should go in is going to take time. And that's a fantastic point, because the left, the radical left, has been infiltrating every institution within American society since the 1950s, maybe even earlier, the 40s. And look at look at the fruit that it's bared, right?
Right. No, absolutely. Look, and another thing that we've talked about previously is that, this big movement in academia right now is this postmodernism, right? Where everything is based on kind of how you feel at any given time. Look, all the good things in life, and I think conservatives will understand this, right? All the good things in life are difficult, right? They're hard. They take time, they take patience, they take discipline, and it's worth it, right? It's not necessarily the destination, but it's the journey, right?
Right.
And you got to put effort into it, right? With the left, right? And I don't want to pat the left on the back and say, oh, hey, good job, you outsmarted us, you routed us on this because you managed to infiltrate, academia, the military, the police force, everywhere, right? All these, like the government, they're everywhere,
right?
They're fucking everywhere. Okay. But it's because what they're offering is this sort of like easiness, right? And that's
right.
what, and they're offering it in this guise of postmodernism. Like it is whatever you want it to be. And we're going to adjust the organization, for your fucking feelings and all this other shit. Right. And then, so these people end up getting into power and, they've got some fucking chip on their shoulder or something. And you talk about the fruits that are born, right? Look, the fruits that they bear are these fruits of laziness and this like lack of discipline. And then now you see it in our culture, right? You see it. And then you get conservatives who need jobs. And so sometimes you end up finding yourself working for some like lefty lunatic, right? And you're sort of like, man, it's like when you're a kid and like your brother grabs your hand and is like, hey, stop hitting yourself. Sometimes I feel like that, right? I'm like, I'm working for some like lefty lunatic and they can't exist without my work, but should I need money? I need to like feed my family. You know what I mean?
Right. I get it.
But, look, I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but, I want us to think about farmers, for example, right? When we talk about like our civic duty, right? Starting as soon as the last election's over, take a breather, maybe you won, maybe you lost, whatever, shake off the dust and get back to it, right? I mean, I think it has to become a lifestyle. And imagine a farmer, right, that decided, well, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a season off. There is no season off for them. Right. Athletes, same thing, right? I mean, they have seasons, but even in the off season, they're still, maintaining a certain level of discipline and fitness, right? Because, they can't retrain themselves sort of, it's not like a binge diet or whatever, right? Where they can just start, you know what I mean? So I think that we need to get into that mindset. And I think conservatives are good at that. And I think conservatives have the discipline and sort of like the, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like the gumption. I mean, there are all sorts of words, for it, that chutzpah or whatever, right? This sort of like internal, and it's across all cultures, across all languages, right? Ganas is a Spanish version, right? You have that desire, right? I think you have the willpower to do that. You just need to do it. And they're, little grains of sand every day. Yes, your vote counts. Your efforts count. And, there's not a magic pill. You may not win the first time, but, we need to not think about, a 1-year plan or a 5-year plan. We need to be thinking at a minimum 20-year plan. Really, I think we need to be looking at a 500-year plan, right?
Right.
Where do we want our country in 500 years? And are we going to ever see it? No. But you hope that you send, your family, your descendants on the right trajectory. They have the mission. They know what they're going to do. And we're talking generational, right? So, look, I know it's easy for folks to kind of throw up their hands and say, well, it's tough. We've already kind of lost. And I think that's the wrong attitude to have. It's like, I want to be like, sack up, get your shit together. Don't be a fucking pussy, and look, I need that sometimes myself. Right. I mean, look, I have my own moments where I'm like, oh man, we're fucked. And I just want to bitch and moan and complain about it and be angry and miserable and punch the fucking wall. You know what I mean? But, I don't know, maybe we need to create battle buddies or something to say, no, dude, stop being a fucking little bitch. Like,
right.
America is, the shining city on a hill. It's an ongoing experiment. It's hard to be an American. You got to do your duty, suck it the fuck up, and, hey, get the sand out of your clit and, just get it done, and realize that it's going to take a long time.
Absolutely. So I'm going to throw up a clip, Mr. Producer. I want you to throw up the Ronald Reagan clip, and when he does, Ray, I want you just to give me whatever you feel, right? Give me whatever comes to mind after this clip. Just I want you to talk about it, and Mr. Producer is going to throw it up right now.
Our founding fathers here in this country brought about the only true revolution that has ever taken place in man's history. Every other revolution simply exchanged one set of rulers for another set of rulers. But only here did that little band of men so advanced beyond their time that the world has never seen their like since evolve the idea that you and I have within ourselves the God-given right and the ability to determine our own destiny. But freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that really kind of encapsulates a lot of the things that we were just discussing. Look, the first thing that came to my mind was Washington and Newburgh, right? Newburgh, New York, when they wanted to make Washington the king. And I mean, it took a lot for that man to say, no. You know, I mean, I want to go back to my farm. You know, I don't want to do this shit, you know? Right. And, you know, same thing with the, you know, they wanted him to run for office after his 8 years, you know, so he set that precedent that, you know, went pretty much unchanged until the Democrats put FDR in office. And, you know, that man had to die for him to get kicked out of office. Right. You know, of course, now we got an amendment that limits the amount of terms, you know, term limits for the president. But, you know, I think about that Newburgh, right? And these are people that made a lot of sacrifices. You know, I think about the paintings of Valley Forge, right? And, you know, they don't have any money. They're going up against the best trained, best equipped, best financed army in the world, you know, with an even better Navy, you know, and they were pretty much fucked, right? And you know, we've talked about this too before, right? The signers of the Declaration of Independence, you know, they signed their death warrants, right? They had some big fucking nuts, right, to make this happen. And what they wanted was freedom to be left alone and, you know, to, you know, look for, you know, follow their sort of pursuit of happiness, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? I mean, these were their inalienable rights, right? I mean, these are really brilliant people that, you know, were grounded in, you know, they were moral people, right? Grounded in, you know, their God, right? The ethics of Christianity, right? The morality of Christianity. So, you know, I think at a root, it's important for us to get back to that. This is why I think it's important for us to articulate our principles and fight for it. And you have to ask yourself, you know, whether or not you believe America is worth fighting for.
Right.
And if you answer yes to that question, but you're not going out and voting, or, you know, look, a lot of people don't even do that. And I consider that the very bare minimum. But if you consider yourself a patriot, you need to do way more than that. You know, and I don't care. You can go on these forums and you can say, oh, you know, voting doesn't make a difference because it's going to be screwed. You know, we're going to be screwed by the voting machines and this and that and whatever. Look, man, maybe some people really are that pessimistic. You know, I think those are maybe the nouveau conservatives, right? But, you know, there's another part of me that says, man, that's the fucking opposition. That's the devil on your shoulder telling you, no, you don't got to do this shit, right? You're gonna convince yourself not even to participate. Like, come on, man. Give me a fucking break. You know what I mean? If you're a real conservative, you're a real patriot. I mean, that's the bare minimum that you're going to do. And, you know, and then, you know, but I think most of us are really going to take the next step, you know? It reminds me of, I'm trying to quote a Bible verse here and I can't even remember it, but I think it was like Isaiah or something. But, you know, you're hearing a lot of the hymns, right? You know, here I am, Lord, right? Basically. And I always take that as sort of, hey, you tell me what to do. You give me the tough battle and I'll go do it. Right. It's easy to say that though, when you're, you know, comfortable, when we're all fat and happy. And I think sometimes that becomes a problem is we all get fat and happy. Right. Like shit gets hard. Oh, I got to wake up at 6 a.m. to go vote. Man, that's crazy. I can't wait. I can't be standing out. It's raining this morning. Man, it's cold in November. Like, I don't know. You know, like, come on, dude. You know, it's like, and these aren't tough battles, right? But I think sometimes, and I'll admit, I don't think this is really Republicans. I think this is really more the lefties. You know, I'm trying to shame the Republicans that don't participate into basically saying, you sound like a fucking communist. Like, sack up, go out, do the bare minimum. If you can do more, you know, find those other people. And, but like Reagan said in his quote, man, you know, it's, we're always just one generation away from losing it. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to live in interesting times. You know what I mean?
No, neither do I.
I don't want to be the 80-year-old in a wheelchair with a sniper rifle who's like, fuck, man, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
I got to depend on these like gender confused fucking soy motherfuckers to like make sure I don't get like a bullet to the back of my brain and shit. You know what I mean?
Right. All right. Well, listen, we got to get going. Raymond Johnson, thank you so much for coming on the show. We are definitely going to have you back on because this was a great and compelling conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I was looking forward to it, and you know, I enjoyed the next time we hang out. You know, even socially. So,
that's it. We'll grab a beer soon.
Yeah, definitely. Take care.